Hello everyone, this is part 2 of What If Naruto Was a Prodigy and in the Anbu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to see more comment down below. The Scroll of Forbidden Seals saw a number of interesting changes. Anbu Combat Platoon Number 5, codenamed Epsilon Team, had successfully intercepted and secured both the Scroll of Forbidden Seals and Sarutobi Konohamaru. Yumi no Iruka suffered light wounds during the course of the night but no permanent damage had been done. Uzumaki Naruto, Anbu agent codenamed Ferret, and assigned under Sigma Team, the Hokage's personal assistant and guard also suffered light injuries but as usual they were gone by the morning, superficial enough for his innate stamina and longevity to heal with ease. As the sun rose, the blonde-haired Anbu agent found himself standing motionless next to the third Hokage as the old man. A group of elite Jonin sat around a large wooden table, discussing the shinobi profiles on top. There were 11 seats overall, although one was conspicuously absent. Naruto was still in a bit of a daze from the morning's intense training. Usually he was up at 0700 hours, where he would wake up the third Hokage and Konohamaru and get them ready for the following day. Breakfast was usually an interesting affair but for the most part he would succeed. Today, however, he had been slapped in the face with a freezing splash of water at 0500 hours and had woken up to see the god of shinobi glowering down at him, decked in his full armor-plated combat uniform. Naruto hadn't even had time to mutter an "eep" before the old man had grabbed his hand and dragged him to a training area. Wet, cold and quite hungry, Naruto had been forced into one of the most grueling training sessions that he had participated in to date. It had been painful. And that's that, Sarutobi concluded cheerfully. He puffed on his pipe, his conical hat keeping the full force of the sun's glare out of his eyes as it slowly rose over the Hokage's monument. We'll conclude this at a later date. Naruto was closest to the window where the fresh breeze was somewhat calming him down, although his face still scrunched up into a pout behind his still damaged mask. That was probably why he saw the burst of movement first. He started, a kunai flipping up from his belt and into his hand in an instant, but a quick burning sensation coming from his tattoo saw him roll his eyes and put it away. A swirl of leaves and a puff of smoke filled the room as the latecomer entered with a dramatic body flicker. Kakashi, Sarutobi intoned. He placed an elbow on the table and rested his chin in the palm of his hand. You're late. Sorry, Kakashi drawled, not looking it at the least. The tall, slender man still looked quite similar to the last time Naruto had seen him, with gravity-defying silver hair, a mask that covered half his face and a droopy eye that seemed to radiate laziness. My usual restaurant was filled with ponies so I had to travel to bird country to get my breakfast. I see, Sarutobi murmured. You couldn't have chosen a different restaurant. Oh, no. Kakashi sounded positively scandalized. My pancakes need to be cooked in a very specific way. Sarutobi nodded gravely and Naruto cocked his head, wondering if there was some kind of code being said between the two or if the old man was just playing along. Kakashi's eye flickered to Naruto and the young Anbu saw a quick crinkle as the silver-haired man smiled. Fingers flashed for a second and Naruto grinned and gave a slight wave as Kakashi, practically slouching all the way, made his way around the table and dropped into the empty seat. So what are we all talking about? Kakashi asked cheerfully. Some of the other Jonin chuckled as Sarutobi sighed. We were just wrapping up the Genin team placements, the third Hokage grumbled. He shifted a few of the papers on his desk. Ah, Kakashi said with dawning comprehension. I assume that I have Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura and Sarutobi Konohamaru then. There was an awkward pause at the table. Some of the other Jonin shifted in their seats and none of them dared to look at the Hokage. For the most part, the old man remained still but there was an undercurrent of something dark as he finished sorting his papers and puffed on his pipe. Sarutobi Konohamaru did not pass the graduation exam, Sarutobi murmured. Therefore, he is ineligible for Genin team placement. The rules cannot be changed on a mere whim. Really? Kakashi replied quietly. From what I've heard, didn't Konohamaru play a large part in an S-rank operation last night? Surely Ferret told you, since he was the one who led it. He shrugged carelessly even as the masked Anbu by the Hokage's side shifted at the knowing look in the silver-haired man's eyes. I would have thought that any academy student able to play such a vital role in the defense of the village would need to be inducted into the shinobi program so that his talents could be put to use. Many of the other Jonin looked visibly surprised. The third Hokage heaved a great sigh, briefly closing his eyes, and fixed Kakashi with a stern look. I see you've been snooping around again, he grumbled. Snooping? Me? Kakashi laughed it off with a wave of his hand. I just heard a few things on my breakfast trip to Bird Country this morning. He leant forward in his chair, somehow slouching in a way that made him come off as both lazy and intent. I'll take Sarutobi Konohama as part of my genin team. Don't worry, Hokage-sama, I'll take full responsibility. The third Hokage was silent for a few moments before he reached into the pile of scrolls sitting in front of him and opened one up. He picked up the stamp off the table and slammed it down on the scroll with a resounding thump. Very well, Sarutobi said gravely. It's on you, Kakashi. Kakashi shrugged. The meeting finished shortly after and the Jonin began to leave the room. Naruto remained motionless, oblivious to the flickered and curious looks that many of the elite shinobi gave him. His gaze was focused totally on Kakashi, who remained slouched at the table reading his book. As Sarutobi rose, chatting quietly one of the Jonin, a tall dark-haired woman with striking crimson eyes, Naruto adjusted his mask over his face and walked towards Kakashi. The other Jonin blinked and lowered his book. Oh, hello, he said lazily. His one exposed eye stared at him blandly. How's it been, Naruto? Captain, Naruto greeted stiffly. Ma, Kakashi interjected, placing his book back in his green flak jacket. You probably shouldn't call me that, I'm not a captain anymore. He cocked his head and brightened. So tell me, have people been missing me? Naruto scratched the back of his head and laughed nervously. Well, he trailed off. Kakashi winced. That's mean, he said with a pout. Naruto chuckled. Actually, Captain, he said, his eyes darting around the room. I'm wondering if you can do me a favor. Oh, Kakashi's one eye rose in interest. What could a measly Jonin like me do for a big strong Anbu like yourself? There was a pause. Save me. Naruto suddenly wailed and he darted forward, grabbing onto Kakashi's flak jacket. Help me, Captain. He's gone insane. What? Kakashi spluttered, trying to pull back from Naruto, but the boy's grip was too strong. The old man. Naruto moaned, sobbing dramatically into Kakashi's flak jacket. The older man rubbed the back of his head nervously as he glanced around, noticing how many of the exiting Jonin were eyeing the two of them incredulously. Naruto suddenly pulled back. He's gone bonkers, he declared firmly. I'm sure it's not that bad, Kakashi mumbled shiftily. You have no idea, Naruto hissed. Suddenly, the boy yelped as a hand grabbed him by the back of his armor. Kakashi looked up as the third Hokage, one hand filled with paperwork, grabbed the blonde and effortlessly yanked him away from Kakashi. Naruto howled as Sarutobi dragged him across the floor, the elderly man's eyes almost closed with boredom. It's time for some more training, Ferret, the Hokage grunted. Captain. Naruto called out desperately before both he and the Hokage disappeared in a flicker of movement. What a creepy kid. Kakashi laughed nervously as the other Jonin gave him some strange looks. He smiled behind his mask, his eye curving up. He pulled out his little orange book and promptly stuck his head in it and became lost to the world. Still, he felt extraordinarily pleased for some reason. It was a bright sunny day. The sky was blue and there was a nice breeze blowing throughout the village. Seeing Naruto again had been entertaining and had lifted Kakashi's spirits. Perhaps he wouldn't fail this next team after all. Weeks later, the third Hokage had slowly reduced the intense workload and training he had placed on Naruto. As a member of the former Uzumaki clan, which had been known for its stamina and longevity, and the current host to the nine-tailed demon fox, Naruto was used to aches and bruises disappearing quite quickly. With the sheer amount of chakra that was pumped into his chakra circulatory system, there wasn't much that could actually keep him down. The third Hokage, however, was one of those few things, and his training left Naruto battered, bruised, exhausted and weepy. Today had been such a relief. The third Hokage had allowed him to sleep through the morning and he had awoken at 1000 hours. Konohamaru had even managed to make himself a quick lunch before he attended to his genin duties, and all of the washing had been done and hung up. Naruto wasn't quite sure what was going on, and a part of him was quite relieved when he saw that the kitchen looked like an explosive tag had gone off in the middle of the bench. Too much change was not good for him, and the thought of either Sarutobi actually becoming a responsible member of the household was just too much to bear. The afternoon had been just as relaxing. The Hokage had been called away on village business, and he had instead sent Naruto to the mission assignment desk on his behalf. Naruto had enjoyed a rather easy day of sorting through the relaxing and even enjoyable paperwork. at least, when compared to getting your face kicked in by an angry Monkey King. At the moment, Naruto was handing out an assignment to a group of 4 chunin, each who nodded respectfully at him before they left. Right. Naruto called out cheerfully as he finished the scroll with an extravagant flourish. He shifted his head and his white porcelain mask gazed at the chunin sitting next to him. Yo, Iruka, when you're done with that, would you place it in outgoing for the mailroom? The client wants the receipt as soon as possible. Of course, Iruka said politely as he waded his way through the sheer volume of paperwork that lay on his table. As always, the appointment of new genin squads brought in a temporary but substantial increase of business. Clients were always interested in seeing new faces and many of them hired a genin squad just to get a glimpse at the abilities of the new workforce. Who knows, perhaps one of those genin would rise up and become Hokage one day. Naruto was scribbling furiously on a mission request and he outlined exactly why the village hidden in leaves was refusing an assassination request, a rather noisy and annoying dog that had been keeping the grumpy old lady up all night. As he finished up, he signed his name and printed underneath it, Anbu, representative of the Hokage, and passed it to a nearby chunin whose arms were loaded with scrolls. Okay, Naruto sighed. He fiddled with his pen, placing it on the table, as a couple of familiar presences entered the room. Yo, Captain. You know, you're going to get me in trouble for impersonating somebody I'm not, Kakashi said idly, rubbing the back of his head as he put his book away. You really should stop calling me that. And you really should stop reading smut in public, Naruto declared flippantly. But since we both know that neither of us will change, shall we get to business? What kind of mission can I get for Team Kakashi today? Another D-rank mission, please, Kakashi said lazily. 2 of his 3 genin sighed at that, their heads dropping low. Naruto grinned at Konohamaru and his teammate, one Haruno Sakura. The pink-haired girl had been the top of the class in academic bookwork and Naruto wouldn't be surprised to see her join Konoha's communication or cryptanalysis department one day. She certainly had the brains. Their third teammate was silent, but Naruto read past Uchiha Sasuke's stony facade and saw the exasperation lurking in the boy's dark eyes. Naruto felt a little pity for the boy. He had certainly had a tough break and only his appointed psychologist knew what horrors tormented him underneath his pale and emotionless features. Really, he wished the boy all the luck in the world on his quest to kill his older brother, Uchiha Itachi, and, honestly, he would probably need it too. From what he heard, Itachi was in a whole other league by himself. The last he checked, there was no immediate plans to hunt him down, although Anbu were always on the lookout, but should the chance appear, a whole Anbu combat platoon was to be allocated for the task. Only Orochimaru had earned such infamy within the ranks of Anbu. Hey, Naruto, Konohamaru demanded. He looked very small next to his 2 teammates. He thrust out a hand and pointed at the blonde Anbu accusingly. Give us a real mission for once. I'm sick of doing crappy chores and irk. Naruto's hand blurred and a scroll slammed into the young Sarutobi's forehead. Konohamaru grunted as his head flipped backwards and he lifted off his feet by the force of the impact, falling back and sprawling onto the ground with a loud thud. Naruto flickered and stood over him, a fist clenched tightly as he waved in front of the boy's face. You have a lot of nerve coming in here and swearing at me after the way you left the kitchen this morning. Naruto said darkly. Konohamaru whimpered as Naruto took in a deep breath and turned to Kakashi, striding past the gobsmacked Sakura and the somewhat amused Sasuke. Actually, I have an interesting mission for you now, Naruto said, his dark mood vanishing as quickly as it had come. He flicked his foot at the scroll on the floor and it shot up into the air, where Kakashi promptly snatched it up and read it. Oh, Kakashi uttered in a surprised voice. He looked a little amused as he gazed at his genin team. AC-ranked mission, for us. Ferret, you're so kind. You've done your 25D ranked missions, Naruto said lazily as he walked back to his table. This is a simple escort mission to the Land of Waves. A rather cranky bridge builder wants some security while he finishes his bridge. Apparently there have been some disgruntled locals stirring up trouble about it, afraid their jobs will go once it's done. Konohamaru was sitting up staring wide-eyed at Kakashi as the Jonin considered it thoughtfully. The silver-haired man said. I dunno. Please, Kakashi-sensei. Konohamaru begged. His eyes were wide and suspiciously bright. We have completed the prerequisites. Sakura added quietly, looking just as hopeful. Sasuke folded his arms and huffed under his breath, but Naruto saw how the dark-haired boy watched his Jonin instructor just as eagerly as the other 2. Well, Kakashi drawled, I suppose we could give it a try. Naruto smiled at Konohamaru's scream of happiness. His smile faded as he felt another presence abruptly closing in, and he only had a few seconds warning as a black-robed Anbu member appeared in the room. A white porcelain mask with red swirls on the cheeks and a small protruding beak gazed up at him. Ferret, the Hokage has summoned you, she intoned. Her spiky ponytail swished as she turned her head, and Naruto caught a glimpse of long thin needles bound within the hair. Yumi no Iruka, you have temporary command of the Mission Assignment Office. Serve your village well. I will, a startled Iruka said. Thank you. Naruto frowned but stood up from his chair. Enjoy your mission, Konohamaru, was all he said before he vanished in a body flicker. Naruto strode through the bottom recesses of the Hokage's tower, his mask concealing the sudden nervousness that had struck him. He had visited the Anbu headquarters before, of course, but he had never been summoned so abruptly from the middle of an assignment before. The bird-masked Anbu escorted Naruto to a set of doors and gestured for him to enter. Inside was a rather bare room. In the middle of the room stood a table, where Sarutobi and a long purple-haired woman hidden behind a dog mask were seated. Uzumaki Naruto, registration code 012607, codenamed Ferret, attached to Sigma Squad. Step forward. The Hokage's voice was not hard, but there was none of the emotion behind it that Naruto was used to when dealing with the third Hokage. Naruto took a step forward and came to attention at the head of the table. Sarutobi didn't even look up at him as he pursued a large manila folder, reading something intently. It was the woman who spoke first, and Naruto recognized her as Azuki Yugao, captain of Anbu Combat Platoon Gamma. He had worked with her previously in training drills and combat scenarios, but other than that knew very little else. Uzumaki Naruto, Yugao said quietly. You are a B-rank shinobi operating as Sigma Squad in personal and work-related duties attached to the Hokage's office, correct? Yes, ma'am, Naruto replied immediately. Your academy scores were rather average, you almost failed ninjutsu until the third Hokage intervened, Yugao said. Her eyes were cool and her voice was flat, as if she had absolutely no opinion on what she was stating. You were fast-tracked to Chunin at 10 in an unprecedented manner. You had no Jonin instructor of Genin team and worked with Sarutobi Hiruzen on your shinobi skills. Your promotion came as you were prepared to take on more additional responsibilities in your position as the Hokage's aide. Shortly afterwards, you applied for Anbu and were administered the competency exam by former Captain Hitaki Kakashi. You passed and were assigned to Sigma Squad, which had remained dormant since the death of the fourth Hokage. Is this correct? Yes, ma'am, Naruto responded quietly. Yugao paused. Your attendance is exemplary. You have completed 11 35 D-ranked missions, 315 C-ranked missions and 42 B-ranked missions. These have come about in your role as the Hokage's personal assistant and your performance in the day-to-day duties that the role requires. You are congratulated on your performance. Naruto almost gaped at the number of D-ranked missions, but it did make sense when he thought about it. The sheer amount of chores and housework that he performed at the Hokage's residence was staggering, and he supposed each one did add up. The C-ranked missions were probably related to his work as a messenger and general aide in the various departments of Konoha. Today's work at the mission assignment desk would have added to his score. However, Yugao cut into his thoughts. Several weeks ago you were assigned a priority S-ranked assignment. Alone and without backup, you retrieved a stolen artifact, escorted the primary objective to safety and held off an enemy Chunin, whose weapon and ninjutsu skills were quite highly rated for his rank. During this operation, you showed courage in the face of danger and exemplified all of the directives that the Anbu abide by. Yugao's eyes flickered to Sarutobi, who nodded, and Naruto was struck by emotion and could only grin in sheer happiness as the third Hokage smiled at him proudly. Your latest combat tests reveal highly advanced ninjutsu skills. You have skill with multiple elemental affinities and have demonstrated advanced abilities in chakra shape manipulation, Yugao continued. You are well trained in hand-to-hand combat and general weapon skills, and your physical and mental abilities far outstrip those in your age group. It is with pride that Konoha recognizes your abilities and achievements and promotes you to a ranked status. Naruto was threatened to split his face wide open and his heart pounded in his chest. Still, a niggle of doubt wormed its way through his euphoria. Was he truly ready to join the ranks of the elite? Compared to many other Jonin, he was still a child flailing away at enemies he couldn't see. This does not mean that you have been promoted to Jonin, the Hokage interjected quietly, as if he could read Naruto's thoughts. Although I believe that that position will be available to you soon, there are protocols that need to be followed. Naruto took a deep breath and calmed himself. Starting today, you shall be attached to Gamma Team under the direct command of Azuki Yugao, Sarutobi continued. He pulled out his pipe and lit it with a flare of chakra. He puffed on it twice and exhaled. Your next assignment is a routine border patrol around Fire Country's southeastern borders. Yes, sir. Naruto acknowledged. Yugao spoke next. Komaki, the bird-masked Anbu member who had escorted him, stepped into the room. This is Uzumaki Naruto, codenamed Ferret. He has just transferred in from Sigma Squad and will replace Crane on the next deployment. He will be attached to your squad and is under your direct command. Yes, ma'am, the bird-masked Anbu, Komaki, said. She turned to Naruto. Ferret, you will gather your supplies and meet us in room 201 for briefing. Go. Naruto nodded and disappeared with a flash of movement. The village hidden in leaves was truly one of, if not the most, powerful shinobi village in the world. Boasting of an enormous population of trained shinobi, Konoha's economy was unrivaled by any other village or country. Part of that lay in its military doctrine. During the First Shinobi War and after the death of the Second Hokage, the Third Hokage had been appointed as command and chief of all military operations within Fire Country and coordinated with shinobi and the Fire Lord Samurai. While the First War certainly ended to Konoha's advantage, a truer description of the aftermath would be that nobody had won. Countries were in shambles. Entire cities had been destroyed or abandoned and a large portion of the skilled workforce had been killed. Konoha had been hit especially hard. Over half of its trained shinobi population had been killed during the war, amounting to 4,000 casualties. For a village whose primary trade was based on mercenary work, the situation was unacceptable. That was when Konoha's doctrine had changed. Instead of a large standing army ready to fight conflicts, Konoha would create a small and elite force of shinobi whose primary purpose was the defense and security of the village and Fire Country. The First Shinobi War had shown that the only thing that happened when two large armies met was death and destruction. Shinobis were gifted with the use of chakra and could perform unimaginable feats, but were just as human as everybody else and could not function without supplies. Furthermore, those unimaginable feats allowed small groups of highly trained men and women to intercept and destroy enemy supply caravans with ease. The Third Hokage had seen the end result and had analyzed the military strategies that had been implemented by all sides during the war. He had concluded that the economic repercussions of losing a large portion of a working shinobi population were too severe. It was a little-known fact that Konoha had almost starved during the immediate aftermath of the First War, and only the continued patronage of loyal customers saw Konoha rebuild and restructure. The Chunin workforce, numbered in the thousands, was strong but too valuable to waste on general military operations. Of course, that didn't mean that they were too invaluable to be used. Rather, during the next two wars, the largest percentage of the shinobi population saw themselves rostered on and off the different fields of battle. The Anbu, however, stayed in battle from the very first moment. Blood was spilled right until the last remains of ink dried on the peace treaty. Their skill, mobility and ability to adapt to different strategies allowed them to strike deep in the heart of their enemies, causing massive damage with minimal casualties. This doctrine was proved to be sound during the Second Shinobi War, where the Third Hokage implemented a defensive strategy that saw the majority of the shinobi holding at the border while elite teams of Anbu were sent into other lands and countries, destroying and decimating enemy supply lines and landing critical hits on enemy war efforts to the point that by the time the army had reached Konoha's borders they were in no condition to face against Konoha's field of fresh and readied army. Konoha left the war within almost perfect condition. Casualties had been light, infrastructure within Fire Country mostly undamaged, and coffers had been full as missions had been continued to be taken up. The other villages had learned. The Third Shinobi War saw the Anbu meet their counterparts, but, being the older of the elite groups, they were generally more experienced and adept at what they did. In the current peacetime, there were 6 combat-ready Anbu platoons with 25 shinobi in each platoon. There were an additional 4 smaller reconnaissance squads, 2 hunter teams, a medical crew and a communications department, each group having a more specialized area of expertise for operations in and around Fire Country. At any one time, 2 of the 6 Anbu platoons would be assigned to General Border Patrol. Many towns and cities hired small teams of chunin for policing and other duties, and they covered the main roads in and out of fire country. The burden of guarding the wilderness borders general fell upon the Anbu platoons, who would split into small 5-man squads and be allocated to different areas. Uzumaki Naruto had joined one of those squads, and it was not as exciting as he had expected an A-rank mission to be. 87, 88, 89, Naruto chanted. He was sitting on a large barrel nestled against the wall of a small wooden shack deep within the wilderness, his legs swinging out from underneath. He was watching with a snicker as one of his fellow Anbu members, a man by the name of Toa, grunted as he pulled himself up and above the frame of the doorway by the tips of his fingers of his left hand. Toa had to have been in his early 20s and wore his hair in a brown spiky ponytail. His mask was Toa said it was a wolf, but Naruto was having a hard time picturing it with the little pink swirls decorating the side of the mask. 99, 100. Naruto finished and let out loud cheer as Toa fell to the ground, panting loudly. He jumped off the barrel and lent Toa a hand, which the other man gratefully took. You did it, and with no chakra either. My fingers hurt, Toa muttered as he shook his spiky head. He shook his hand gingerly and winced. That might hurt in the morning. You could always ask Komaki for some acupuncture, Naruto said with a wry grin and snorted when Toa shuddered. No thanks, Toa said with a groan. I've seen what she does to the enemy with those needles and I don't want them anywhere near me. Naruto nodded briefly at Frog, the large burly Anbu, undoubtedly a member of the Akamaki clan. Frog waved back absently but continued focusing on Dog 2, a petite and slender person that the blonde Anbu still couldn't tell if they were male or female. Dog 2's body shape and voice were completely androgynous. Frog towered over the other Anbu as the two played cards and made he or she seem small and fragile in comparison. Naruto had seen Dog 2 spar though and knew that they only seemed small. Without a doubt, Dog 2 was the most vicious hand-to-hand fighter he had ever seen, going for all the weak points and soft spots without mercy. Yo, squad captain. Toa called up to the roof of the hut. I think it's time to swap shifts. Komaki nodded and stood up from her position. Technically, the whole squad was on R&R shift after completing their 48-hour patrol along the southeastern border. However, protocol dictated that one member of each squad remain on watch duty while the rest took their 10 hours rest and got ready for the next patrol. It was grueling, hard and absolutely exhausting. After spending 4 shifts with his squad, Naruto couldn't have asked for anything else. You're on from now until 1200 hours, Komaki said. Her head cocked and she leaned forward. Now, did you want me to look at those poor fingers of yours? Toa jerked and Naruto chuckled. Komaki leaned back with a satisfied air around her. Shut up, he muttered. He was about to say something else when Komaki stilled and quickly raised a hand. Naruto tensed and fell into combat position. Frog and Dog 2 joined him as Komaki scanned the nearby forests. She made a series of quick signs with her hands, Anbu code quick and to the point. Incoming 12. The 5 Anbu blurred and moved into position around the small clearing, each picking a vantage point that would allow him to suppress an enemy's advance at carefully designed choke points. His heart was beating furiously and he flexed his muscles, increasing his blood flow and peering carefully into the brightly lit forest. He waited for what seemed like an eternity, unmoving and hidden amongst some rocks. Sweat trickled down his face but was almost instantly absorbed by his mask. He felt the spring loader in the sleeve of his cloak bump against his skin, ready to drop the sharp blade into his hand at a moment's notice. Nearby, he absently noticed Toa placing his hand on the ground as he tried to sense vibrations or movement from underneath. The 12-year-old boy waited. His mind was clear and his hand was steady as he prepared to enter his first life and death battle. It did not go the way the Anbu wanted. A series of sharp, high-pitching whistling noises filled the air and something small and round literally plopped onto the ground less than a meter away from Naruto. For a split second, he stared at the small lead ball no larger than throwing ball with a crimson tag wrapped around it, the strange squiggly Fuinjutsu staring back at him. A moment later, the ball exploded with a deafening roar of fire and the man-sized field of rocks where Naruto had been standing was blown apart. The ground shuddered and soil and rock was thrown up into the air. Naruto reappeared on the roof of the cabin and jerked his head up, dirt and soot flowing off his robes. Appearing from the very top of the massive trees that littered fire country was the enemy. They were no more than a series of black shapes that dotted the clear blue sky, gliding towards them at great speed. Tiny little dots fell from them as they dove into the clearing, and half a dozen explosions rocked the clearing as the Anbu squad was forced from hiding. Naruto weaved some signs, but the closest of the enemy raised something at him. The sun in his eyes, Naruto didn't take the chance and immediately jumped off the roof. A second later, a dozen kunai slammed into where he had been standing, punching through the wooden boards with ease. He landed on the ground and his kunai appeared in his hand. Something whistled in the air and Naruto turned and blocked, sparks appearing as he deflected a series of kunai that burst from the trees and into the clearing. His breathing was harsh, but his mind was curiously clear as he blocked the last of the sharp blades. The ground shuddered again as more explosions went off and metal clanged on metal in the distance as his fellow squad members moved to engage the enemy. Naruto would do the same. Fire release. Great wave of flame. Naruto reared his head back and warmth blazed from his throat as he spat a searing wave of heat in front of him. It surged past the trees and the leaves and grass instantly caught fire as great plumes of smoke began to rise through the air. A set of shuriken slipped into his hand and he clenched it as he formed the ram sign, stamping one foot on the ground. A wall of earth rose up behind him, the hasty earth construct intercepting a series of whistling kunai that would have slammed into his back. Naruto kept his eyes trained on the fire blazing in the forest as he leveled his shuriken. Something blurred as the ambusher escaped from the flames and the blonde tracked it, waiting and now. Shuriken shadow clone technique. The set of shuriken spun forward and glowed green. Suddenly there were dozens of them and they rained forward, slamming into the figure. Metal sparked on metal as the figure somehow twisted in the air, but whoever it was had been struck and they dove to the ground. Naruto channeled chakra into his legs and darted forward just as an explosive sphere was hurled at his location, which disappeared into a ball of rising fire. A kunai slipped into his hand as he converged on the enemy shinobi. As he got closer, he finally got a good look at the attackers. They were dressed in purple flak jackets and light gray tunics, their heads covered with a hood and their eyes hidden behind goggles. A headband was strapped around their heads, the symbol unknown to Naruto. The strangest part about them was the large yellow contraption strapped to their backs, yellow armored plates covering from their necks down to their legs and across to cover their arms. The enemy in front of him seemed to be struggling as he gripped the large contraption clumsily and was unprepared for Naruto as he appeared before him, a kunai swinging up to deliver a lethal blow. He was intercepted by another enemy shinobi, the man's goggles gleaming as he swooped down and swung something at Naruto. Naruto ducked and paused in his charge. He crouched and channeled chakra in his feet as the shinobi hovering in front of him held a squat rectangular object at him. He jumped back just as there was a strange clicking noise and a kunai flew past him. The object clicked again and Naruto desperately swung his kunai through the air, batting away countless kunai as the strange machine shot them at him again and again. He swiveled his head one streak close enough to cut hair and grunted when two slid past his guard and slammed into his cloak. His armor saved him as he landed on the ground, retreating from the furious barrage. Shadow clone technique. A single shadow clone formed around him and together they formed seals. A moment later, one of them slammed his hands on the ground. Earth release, earth flow river. The ground underneath that Naruto's fingers trembled and liquefied as the elemental chakra poured into it while a huge surge of chakra saw a rising river of mud surge towards the two enemies. The other Naruto inhaled and formed the tiger seal. Fire release. Blazing river. Fire spewed from his mouth and the wave of mud and soil cooked and burned into as a wave of black glowing tar swept forward. The second shinobi grabbed his comrade's hand and tried to rise above the dual elemental technique into the sky, but the contraption on his back groaned and Naruto watched as his wave of fiery soil engulfed the first shinobi. His heart clenched at the terrible screams that the man emitted and he could taste blood in his mouth. His moment of self-reflection didn't last long as the second shinobi, screaming something incomprehensible at him, hurled an explosive sphere at him. Naruto formed a sign just as the sphere exploded and replaced with the splintered remains of the barrel he had been sitting on earlier, drawing back closer to the rest of the squad. The enemy had taken him truly by surprise. Nobody had been expecting such a devastating aerial assault, and the technology and weapons that the enemy shinobi were wielding were truly fearsome. The launchers in their hands spewed out dozens of kunai every few seconds, and the explosives they hurled were extremely potent, sending soil and debris zipping through the air. Naruto was in a bit of a daze as his reflexes took over, dodging and deflecting kunai as he weaved in and out of the battlefield. Nearby, he saw Dog-2 surrounded by many of the enemy, the petite close combat shinobi unable to get into range to use, while Komaki and Toa were back to back, the squad captain using Senbon attached to ninja wire to create an almost impenetrable defense while the latter used wind techniques to cover her back. A flyer soared away from Frog as the man's arm expanded to incredible lengths, reaching through the air and catching the squirming enemy in his meaty fist. With a loud roar, the Akamaki brought his hands down and crushed the shinobi against the tree. In a 12-on-5 fight, they were already 2 ahead. It wasn't to last long. Naruto weaved a series of signs as he ducked underneath a blazing trail of kunai and slashed the air with his hand. Wind release, wind blade. An almost invisible blade of sharpened elemental chakra shot through the sky and struck an enemy shinobi head-on. To Naruto's horror, the wind blade slammed into the contraption on the enemy's back and broke off into 2, a large slice of wind rushing over the other man's head and a small blade going underneath. He jumped back, shuriken whirring through the air as a shuriken shadow clone technique forced 3 of the flyers to veer off and away. He was about to follow it up when an explosion rocked the ground and Naruto was forced away from the searing heat. He landed nimbly and looked up in horror. Dog-2 was weaving in and out of the attacks of 4 flyers as they hovered above the Anbu, shooting dozens of kunai at him. As a nearby rocked the ground, Dog-2 stumbled and the other shinobi struck. Kunai rained down upon him and Dog-2 fumbled, parrying and blocking. 2 streaked past the defenses and slammed into his shoulder. He stumbled and another hit him in the thigh. Dog-2 staggered and one of the flyers dove down at great speeds. He spiraled past Dog-2 and spun around, hand reaching up to grab something from the contraption on his back. With a roar that went unheard on the battlefield, he swung a gleaming blade and caught Dog-2 right in the face. The mask shattered and the Anbu collapsed in a crumpled heap. Lightning release. Static pulse shot. Naruto weaved through a series of signs and held up his left hand. Elemental chakra flared and crackled into existence on the palm of his hand. He swiped at it with his right hand and a bolt of crackling blue and purple lightning lanced forward with the boom of thunder. The flyer, just finishing his sword movement, was struck and went hurtling through the air in a cascading wave of electricity. The flyer righted itself after a few moments and soared off into the sky, apparently unaffected by the powerful technique. The remaining 4 Anbu eventually pushed past the enemy and grouped up, but they were still trapped in the clearing. Toa used his wind techniques to create currents of wildly whipping wind that circled around them, blowing away the constant downpour of kunai. Komaki used pinpoint-accurate senbon needles to intercept explosive spheres, detonating them early as the containers were breached. Frog, his armor cracked and broken, panted behind them, desperately trying to stem the bleeding from his multitude of wounds. That left Naruto as the only one in position to launch an attack, his hands twisted together in the tiger sign. He spat out streaks of flame from his mouth, bullets of fire streaking through the air just as fast as the kunai streaked down. But the flyers were too fast and quick in the air and they merely paused in their attack and soared away. This stopped Toa and Komaki from being overwhelmed but didn't give Naruto the time to pull of one of his deadlier combination techniques. The ground shuddered underneath the relentless assault as the 4 Anbu held off the remaining enemy. Toa was beginning to look tired and the wind began to abate. Naruto gathered his formidable chakra and was just about to step in when a dark shadow came over the group. His eyes darted up and widened. A machine, 5 times bigger than the flying contraptions the enemy shinobi were using, came to rest directly above them. 3 dark figures sat on the golden machine as long white cloth flapped gently behind it and it made a curious humming noise as it floated there. Something clicked and a long slender tube slid out from the bottom of the craft. Naruto could barely make out a small muscular figure bringing his fists together when yellow light began to glow around him. Electricity sparked and the 4 Anbu paused for an instant as the flyers flew off. Earth release, underground excavation. Naruto slammed his hands into the ground and chakra roared around him. The light grew brighter and brighter and a terrible screech filled the air as the ground around the small group gave way and collapsed around them. Earth began to grow overhead as Naruto desperately tried to mold the chakra as fast as he could. There was a sudden flash and a torrent of yellow light flared from above. Naruto, his ears ringing with howling wind and his gloves coated in mud, could only watch as large stream of light slammed down into his earth technique. The last thing he recalled was a powerful tug and a giant shadow covering him and then all went black. He awoke moments later, his entire body aching and sore but still in one piece. It was dark and dirt and stone were crushing him, he was struggling to breathe and he began to flail around urgently. His lungs burned, his mouth was dry. Chakra flared through him as he tried earth release, earth tunneling technique, but it failed. White spots appeared in his vision and his breathing grew more and more labored as his struggles started to die away. Suddenly the weight on him was getting lighter and whatever was crushing him started to shrink. The darkness around his vision receded as painful bright light hit him in the eyes and air rushed in to fill the cavity around him. He sucked in a deep breath, then another and another, reveling in the smell of smoke and dirt and blood. He opened his eyes and squirmed, fighting against the rubble around him. Ferret! Somebody hissed and Naruto jerked. His eyes swung to the left where Toa was crouched in the mud. The other Anbu made the quick signal for silence and Naruto complied. His eyes drifted up towards the deep blue sky, where a flock of birds were passing underneath the clouds. No, wait. With growing dread, Naruto watched as dozens, hundreds, no, at least 1,000, black specks soared overhead, ignoring the splintered and burning remains of the Anbu outpost. This wasn't just an enemy squad. This was an army. An invasion. Naruto didn't need a map to know where they were going. As the last of the flying contraptions left his view and Toa crawled over to him and helped him up from the mud, he became aware of just what the huge weight on his chest had been. Frog, wounded and bloodied Frog, had shielded them all with his body expansion technique, and what little remained of the Anbu made Naruto want to gag. His eyes burned as Toa pulled him out of the muck and gore and the two Anbu limped out of the large crater and back onto the forest floor. They collapsed, joining Komaki as she fluttered in and out of consciousness. We have to warn them, Naruto murmured after a few moments. How? Toa asked. He sounded tired. Naruto ignored him and staggered to his feet and pulled off his mask. He wiped a streak of blood across his brow and his hands flew in a series of seals. Summoning technique. He slammed it down on the ground and a puff of smoke exploded beneath his fingers. When it dissipated, a small brown monkey appeared, blinking cutely as it looked around. I need pen and pencil, Naruto muttered. He patted down his vest. Pen, paper, pen, paper. His hand came to his utility belt and he suddenly recalled his field map. He whipped it out and laid it on the ground, pinning it underneath a rock. Right. Here, a soft feminine voice said weakly and Naruto's eyes shot up. Komaki was awake and threw him a red marker. Naruto snatched it and regarded the map carefully. With trembling hands, he reached up and drew a big red X where the Anbu rest station had been. The words LV3, emergency aerial attack imminent, followed suit with the number 1000 circled. Komaki snatched the marker afterwards and Naruto drew back as she flipped the map around and began sketching down the disposition of the enemy forces. A crude flyer, kunai launcher, explosive sphere and the large bomber were drawn, the squad captain deftly writing down as much as they had learned about the enemy. She finished in less than a minute and folded the map up. Wait. Toa called over from the other side of the clearing. He limped over and handed Naruto a headband. It bore the strange symbol on it, the one that he hadn't recognized. He hadn't even asked the others if they knew where it was from, but judging by the look of the other two Anbu he doubted that they knew either. Toa hesitated and then quietly passed over the two shattered remains of Dog 2 and Frog's masks. The white porcelain was dulled and grimy with soot and mud. Naruto took them all and wrapped the headband around the map and broken mask shards. He bent down and handed it to the monkey, who eyed him far more intelligently than a normal animal would. Return to Konoha as quick as you can, Naruto ordered. His hands squeezed into fists. Get Enma to summon you there if you have to. The third Hokage must be warned an invasion is coming. The monkey let out a strange purr and disappeared in a plume of smoke. Naruto sighed and part of the terrible weight on his shoulders disappeared. He had done the best he could. Now, they could only wait and hope that the Hokage would get the message in time. For the sake of the village, he could only pray they weren't too late. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat behind a desk in the mission assignment office puffing slowly on his pipe. The windows were open and a fresh breeze swept gently into the room. His hat on the table in front of him, the third Hokage allowed the bright sunny day to wash over him and he enjoyed the low buzz of chatter and the call of birds from the distance. It truly was a marvelous day and he could feel his eyes drooping down. Without a care of his Chunin subordinates, the Hokage closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. It was a marvelous day. The office was relatively quiet at this particular time. The early morning queues had been sorted and taken care of, and it was still a few hours before the lunch rush would appear, usually the elderly and less urgent chores that would see Jen and team scurrying about doing everything from gardening to washing dishes to painting fences. Many of the newly instated shinobi were seemingly baffled at the tediousness of the missions, but it was good for them, Sarutobi thought. A shinobi village served the needs of its clientele, and shinobi would complete whatever missions they were allocated, whether the client wanted the dog walked or a country overthrown. For the sake of prosperity, Sarutobi would sacrifice the pride of some punk genin who thought the work was beneath them. Yosh! What a splendid day, Guy-sensei. Indeed. Come, Team Guy, let us find a new mission for us to complete. Sarutobi felt a twitch developing as the two voices grew louder and louder. He kept his eyes closed as many of the chunin around him grimaced. Sarutobi liked Guy as a shinobi. He was powerful, strangely charismatic and energetic. He got on well with clients, performed each mission with enthusiasm and dedication, and filed his paperwork correctly. There was no doubt that the hand-to-hand combat master was one of the most powerful shinobi on Konoha's roster. None in the village could best the eccentric jonin at his art. His ninjutsu was sparse but rare and quite powerful, and his genjutsu was surprisingly potent. All in all, Guy had earned his A rank with ease and was one of the few jonin who continued to climb higher and higher towards S-rank territory. Yes, Sarutobi liked Guy as a shinobi. As a person, however, there were few others who could bring about such a powerful headache. Ah, Hokage-sama, Guy boomed out from across the hall. Sarutobi grunted and opened his eyes, looking grumpy. How are you this fine day? The Hokage muttered something inaudible as he yawned, his lethargy leaving him as pure youth flowed through him merely by association with the spandex-wearing bowl-haired man. Bright white teeth gleamed as Guy's genin team followed up. The little guy was just as headache-inducing as his jonin instructor, but the Hyuga appeared resigned by Guy's behavior and the girl just looked sheepish. I am well, Guy, Sarutobi said a little snappily. There went a perfectly good afternoon snooze. Has your team come for another mission? Indeed we have. Guy grinned and flashed thumbs up. We have already weeded Konoha's public gardens in record time. He paused and glanced around. Oh, Hokage-sama, where is your youthful aide? Ferret is on an A-ranked mission, Sarutobi replied as he reached for the D-rank mission scroll. Guy seemed to ponder this, and it was the intelligence that flashed in his eyes that was what Sarutobi believed made Guy truly dangerous. Beneath his exuberant and somewhat annoying personality was the mind of a shinobi who could look underneath the underneath and connect the dots. I see. Lee chimed in. He clenched his fist. Ferret-kun has truly been blessed with the springtime of youth. I shall train even harder to match his genius. Hey, Sarutobi uttered in amusement. Perhaps one day Lee would be giving Naruto the same headaches that his jonin instructor gave the third. The Hokage was reading over the D-ranked mission scroll in no particular hurry when a puff of smoke burst from nowhere. Sarutobi saw Guy instantly tense and relax as the summoning technique became clear. Oh, Sarutobi muttered, raising his eyebrows. A small brown monkey chattered excitedly as it appeared in the room. Ignoring the somewhat bemused stares of many of the chunin and clients, it bounded over to the Hokage with a curious lumpy parcel in its hands. Sarutobi took it from the monkey and felt cloth and cold metal in his hand. With a flutter, the cloth unraveled and something white fell to the ground. It clattered there, the sound resounding quite loudly as Sarutobi stared at it grimly. Pieces of a white porcelain Anbu mask lay there, cracked and smeared with the muck and bloody grime. Absently, a part of Sarutobi's mind noted the distinct patters and put a name to the shattered remains of the mask. The first one was definitely a piece from Dog 2, a member of Gamma Team's 4th squad. The second was too smashed and scorched for him to recognize. They spoke of a tale to Sarutobi. There had been a battle. There were casualties. Naruto was still alive. There was a situation urgent enough that required immediate communication with the Hokage. All this passed in an instant as Sarutobi turned to the rest of the parcel. The genin team looked confused and Lee was just about to speak, but Guy's hand shot up and for once the jonin was silent, his face somber and serious as he too gazed at the package. Sarutobi opened up the paper deftly and laid it flat on his table. It was a field map, extending from Fire Country's southeastern border. Sarutobi's eyes took in the detail: the large red X, drawn over the Anbu rest station, the number circled and underlined in the corner. Konoha had also been circled, arrows pointing at it with a rough estimation of speed. He flipped the map over. There were crude and hurried sketches, quick dot points of vital information had been scrawled down in a rush. His eyes swung to the last object and with steady hands he turned it over. As soon as he saw the symbol staring back at him defiantly, he understood. The room froze. The walls trembled and the wooden floorboards creaked as a huge swell of force blanketed the area. The genin were paralyzed, each limb locked in place by the sheer intent behind the chakra. Guy looked deathly serious and the chunin froze in their duties. Many of the clients looked absolutely petrified. The incredible pressure weighed down on them all, but it was not suffocating killing intent that poured forward. Each one could feel the heavy iron-laden will roar into existence as Sarutobi Hiruzen rose from his chair, the god of Shinobi emerging from his aged counterpart. The Hokage snapped his fingers and two Anbu appeared before him, their heads bowed as they weathered the pure force emanating from their leader. I am declaring a level 3 emergency. Sarutobi thundered. Sounds all alarms. All non-combatants are to evacuate at once. All shinobi forces are to report to defensive stations immediately. Prepare the Anbu and assemble the council. His brown eyes were cold and hard. We are now at war. At roughly midday, the peaceful tranquility of the village hidden in leaves was broken by a loud wailing siren that tore through the air. Flocks of birds screeched as they burst from the trees and tens of thousands of men and women froze all at once. The siren rose up to an almost head-splitting screech and began to fall. A moment later, the Konoha burst into a flurry of activity as preparation began to take place. A voice began to calmly speak, amplified by a technique that made it echo all over the village as shinobi began to move to their designated stations. Attention! A level 3 emergency has been declared. Attention! A level 3 emergency has been declared. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. All combat personnel are to attend their action stations. All non-combat personnel are to evacuate into the designated safe zone. Seek immediate assistance if you are unable to evacuate. I repeat, seek immediate assistance if you are unable to evacuate. Attention! A level 3 emergency has been declared. The third Hokage appeared on the top level of the Hokage's tower and immediately swung his eyes out to his village. The woman's loud calm voice continued to repeat the same instructions and he saw hundreds of shinobi pouring through the streets and jumping on the roofs, rushing to their various defensive positions. Hordes of milling civilians and non-combatants were scurrying into buildings, seeking the safety of the tunnels and shelters that led them to the mass evacuation area underneath the Hokage's monument. Despite the urgency of the situation, Sarutobi felt proud as he saw the men and women under his command following their training and working together. Two small puffs of smoke appeared in the room as Koharu Utane and Homura Mitokado appeared. They wore a white ornamental cloak but underneath were glimpses of flak jackets and utility pouches. They were as old as the third Hokage was, yet they too were listed as jonin on the shinobi roster and for good reason. Hiruzen, Homura greeted quietly. His voice was somber as both he and Koharu joined him in observing the village reactions. What new crisis threatens us now? Hardly new, Sarutobi replied quietly. He passed Koharu the headband he had received and saw the dawning comprehension in her eyes. I see, she said softly. So it's come to this once more. Sky Country has returned. The cycle continues, Homura murmured as he took in the symbol of the Sky Country's hidden village. They, who we destroyed them in the Second Shinobi War, will now try to destroy us. They will try, Sarutobi said. His voice was as hard as stone. The will of fire is with us. They will not succeed. The third Hokage turned around as he felt more and more shinobi gathered around them. Nara Shikaku joined them looking unnaturally sharp and focused, the jonin commander muttering furiously with a continuous stream of aides as he organized the village's defenses. Four white shapes blurred into the room as the porcelain masks of the Anbu captains appeared. There wasn't even a flicker of movement as the Anbu commander appeared, his silver mask gleaming in the sunlight. More shinobi appeared, jonin squad leaders and defense team captains. They assembled before him and waited patiently. Sarutobi took a deep breath and began. Earlier this morning an Anbu rest house was attacked by enemy shinobi, he said quietly. The room was still as the siren blared and the instructions continued to repeat themselves. They managed to send back vital information regarding the composition and identity of their attackers, as well as the current bearing. He paused. It was Sky Country, he finished gravely. His advisors remained still as a ripple of shock spread across those shinobi older enough to remember the Second Shinobi War. Sky Country. Guy repeated. I have never heard of such a place. You wouldn't have, Nara Shikaku interrupted. The man's eyes were darting round furiously as he began to formulate strategies and make connections. They were a moderately large group of shinobi who entered the Second War attempting to overthrow the five great nations. Konoha defeated them 40 years ago. He frowned. If I recall correctly, Skynin used advanced technology to supplement their offensive power. They lacked the resources and knowledge of the five great villages and focused on small personal weaponry and mobile platforms. Indeed, Sarutobi said solemnly. This will be an aerial attack on the village. Hyuga Hyashi inhaled sharply. There has not been a direct military attack against the village for quite some time. Barring the attack of the nine-tailed demon fox, we have successfully prevented such an occurrence since the First Shinobi War. Although an aerial attack explains how the enemy bypassed our border guards, Akamaiki Chusa rumbled. An aerial attack? Sarutobi Asuma questioned. He scratched at his chin. Is such a thing possible? It has never been demonstrated as a legitimate military doctrine, Homura replied. His glasses glinted. Nonetheless, by the time the sun sets we shall soon see just how effective it is. The number of enemy range in the late hundreds, if not 1,000, Sarutobi continued. Each Skynin possesses a device that allows them to fly. They are equipped with advanced weaponry-propelled launchers that are able to throw kunai at incredible speeds and with incredible force and small spheres that can explode with the force of a Class 1 explosive note. Furthermore, they appear to be in possession of a mobile flying platform that allows them to deliver a devastating attack to an area immediately below it. The surrounding shinobi burst into mutters, quietly talking with each other as they digested the news. Nara Shikaku looked thoughtful as he absorbed the new data while the Anbu commander shifted. At present, we have a force of 2,128 active shinobi in the village, the commander said. His or her voice was monotone and sounded artificial in nature. Nothing could be seen behind the mask. Approximately 6,250 of our armed forces are currently engaged in missions around Fire Country and can be recalled in a matter of days. We have several thousand shinobi deployed on international missions. We outnumber them but they are better equipped, Shikaku murmured. They've also had 40 years to gather intelligence and strategize where we have half a day. This will become bothersome. Bravo and Epsilon teams will provide security for Konoha's priority infrastructure, Sarutobi declared and the muttering halted. Omega team will be on standby to repel invaders who penetrate past the outer defenses. Hunter teams, Omicron, and Lambda, will target the enemy's mobile platforms. We shall designate these targets as bombers. The communication department will coordinate between local garrison commanders to engage the enemy. And, the Anbu commander interjected. Recon Squad, Kappa, will replace Sigma Squad's priority role and aid in the defense of the Hokage. The ANBU's voice held no emotion whatsoever and Sarutobi accepted this with a grudging nod. Nara Shikaku has full operational control. He declared firmly. I shall join the field of battle and hold position here. Captains Bird, Boar and Dog exchanged looks. We protest, Hokage-sama, Dog said quietly. Your protest is noted, Sarutobi acknowledged. However, I will not let my village burn as I cower away in a bunker. At this present time, Nara Shikaku has full control over Konoha's military forces. Should I be killed in action, Protocol 7 will be enacted. Shinobi, remember what you fight for and defend our home. Dismissed. Sarutobi turned away from the council and stared out at the village. He felt his former teammates take his side and smiled grimly, knowing that they too would not be dissuaded. As the chakra presences of Anbu Recon Team Kappa surrounded the, Sarutobi watched the skies and waited for the enemy. He would not have to wait long. Naruto wiped the sweat from his head as he finished tying the bandage around his arm. Several kunai had punctured his cloak. While most had blunted on his armor, one had struck his exposed upper arm and sliced a good chunk of muscle and flesh off. The pristine white bandages were already beginning to darken with red, but the young blonde Anbu ignored it as he donned his cloak. He could feel the medical chakra pre-soaked into the bandages settling in his arm as he jumped up and donned his mask. I'm all patched up, he called out to his remaining teammates. Toa looked pleased as he crouched beside Komaki. The squad captain had ingested a blood-clotting pill and Toa had patched her superficial wounds. A thick bandage was woven around her head, the medical chakra imbued in it rushing into the split scalp and easing the pain in her head. Toa himself had come out of the fight relatively unscathed, but because of that he had been the one to enact Anbu Directive 7. There was nothing left of Frog and Dog 2, not even ashes. Despite the relative good health of the surviving members of Squad 4, the mood in the air was grim and tense. The attack had come suddenly and without warning, and they had failed to defend their post. The enemy had taken the lives of their comrades and they had been powerless to avenge them. In Naruto's heart burned a terrible ache of deep roaring hatred. The symbol of the enemy haunted him, and in a rather detached way he noted that he had never felt as savage and angry as he did right at that particular moment. It was only the thought of the third Hokage that allowed him to keep his emotions bottled up. If the information was received by the Hokage in time, then the incoming aerial invasion would meet a fully prepared and alert village, thousands of shinobi ready to defend their precious home with their very lives. That gave Naruto comfort. By surviving, they had dealt a massive blow against the enemy and could very well have saved tens of thousands of lives with the vital intelligence they had sent back. The rational part of him, the one that Sarutobi had drew out of him with cold logic and brutal truth, knew that the lives of Dog 2 and Frog had been worth the intelligence they had gathered. The emotional part of him just strewed and despised the fact that he could even think that. Something tugged at the edge of his mind and Naruto instantly focused. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. "We have incoming," he muttered. Toa twitched in annoyance and his hands blazed a series of seals. Illusion, mirage of the forest. A steady field of chakra rose around both he and Komaki. He was staggering to her knees as she gripped a gleaming senbon in her hand. The moment a shinobi entered the shimmering waves of expanding invisible chakra, they would be gripped by the illusion and see nothing but trees and swirling leaves. There was no need. Naruto felt his Anbu tattoo pulse and held up his hand. The approaching shinobi were Anbu, perhaps it was another squad from Gamma Team. They waited as the Shinobi 3, Naruto concluded as they came closer, leapt into the clearing. They appeared with a flicker of movement right before Naruto and they were good. If he had blinked, he would have missed them arriving. "Identify," Naruto commanded. There was no hesitation in his voice. "Iota Squad, Recon Squad 4 of Konoha's Anbu Division," came the soft, almost too quiet reply of the head of the three shinobi. "I am Squad Captain Kage. Accompanying me is Crow 3 and Snake 5. The man lifted his head and Naruto saw a pure black porcelain mask staring back at him. There were two white dots where the eyes should have been, and when combined with the effect of the dark Anbu cloak produced an eerie effect indeed. There seemed to be no end to the darkness in the hood, and for a split second Naruto almost became lost in the two white dots of light as they sucked him in and beyond. Then, with a subtle shake, he dispelled the illusion. "I am Ferret, Sigma Squad attached to Gamma Team's 4th Squad," Naruto introduced. He nodded at the two members of the Recon Squad, who had been standing behind him all along. Behind them was Toa and Komaki, the two combat Anbu lowering their weapons cautiously. "This is Komaki, Squad Captain of Gamma's 4th Squad, and Toa." "Status?" Kage asked as he rose from the ground. Naruto grimaced from behind his mask. "2 dead, 1 moderate injury," he said. "We were attacked by a group of unknown shinobi. They were able to fly and they wore a gold machine on their backs." Kage nodded. "Sky Country," he said. His voice seemed naturally soft. "They have attacked up and down the southern border. We saw no signs of the rest of Gamma Team, but there was significant battle damage in many areas. We encountered a group of 12. I lost 3 men to them." Naruto paused for a moment out of respect. "A large group of them flew overhead about 25 minutes ago," he informed the other group. "Their bearing put them in line with Konoha. Their speed would indicate that they will only be a few moments off the destination." Komaki broke in. Her voice sounded wobbly, but she stood firm. "They might already be there." Snake 5 took a step forward. "Yamanaka Yuka, codenamed Snake 5, she introduced. Her voice was pleasantly smooth. "I'm the communications and interrogation expert. Is there time to send a message?" "I sent a summon creature that should have arrived by now," Naruto answered. Snake 5 sighed in obvious relief. "We'll have to trust in our comrades to defend our home." The ice was broken. As a courtesy, the Anbu took off their masks and observed their comrades' faces. Naruto had seen Komaki before, a gray-eyed woman with 2 light brown bangs dropping from her head and the rest of her hair tied up in an elaborate senbon-filled bun. Toa, a dark brown-haired man with red lines tattooed down his face. Crow 3 turned out to be a member of the Hyuga clan with short-cropped black hair, pure white eyes and a black seal imprinted on his forehead. Yuka was a slender and lean blonde girl in her teens with bright blue eyes and smile that made something twist uncomfortable in Naruto's stomach, while Kage was a young man in his early 20s with nondescript looks. Naruto was so busy analyzing them that he missed them analyzing him. Crow 3, Hyuga Daichi, looked impressed and whistled quietly to himself while Yuka's mouth dropped. "Oh," she cooed and reached over to pinch his cheek. "Why, don't you look so cute?" Naruto swatted her hand away in annoyance. She pulled it back and grinned, placing her hands on her cheeks. "Aren't you a big tough Anbu?" she sang in a babyish voice. Naruto had developed a twitch above his eye as he narrowed him at the pretty girl. "Yuka," Kage said tiredly. "Stop poking the combat squad Anbu before he sets you on fire." "Oh, Pui," Yuka pouted. She folded her arms. "You're no fun." Komaki, Toa and Daichi were chatting quietly, each of them clearly relieved to see other Konoha shinobi while Kage and Naruto walked a little further away from the group. The rather bland-looking Anbu turned to Naruto and observed the young boy carefully. "Have you taken command?" he asked abruptly. Naruto went to shake his head and paused. "Komaki is still the squad leader, but we'll have to see if her head injury affects her judgment. Until I suppose I am. I was contemplating taking my squad back to Konoha," Kage said. He gazed off into the distance. "Perhaps we can link up with other shinobi in the surrounding regions and assist with the defense of the village." Naruto bit his lip. He definitely wanted to go back to the village as soon as he could. Even now, his stomach clenched as he thought about the incoming danger. Konoha could be under attack right now. He wanted to go, but "I think we should stay," Naruto said quietly. This was a safe zone for the surrounding patrols. "We should regroup with Gamma Team and continue to patrol the border. The air attack might only be the start of an invasion and there'll be nobody left to fight if we leave." Kage paused. "I had considered that," he admitted. "Very well. We'll stay to assist you." Naruto shook the man's hand firmly and together they walked back to the group. During the founding of the Konoha, the first Hokage and the Senju clan had worked together with Uchiha Madara and the Uchiha clan to design and construct the village. Both clans were powerful and over the course of centuries of warfare had made many enemies, none who were happy at the idea of the two strongest clans in the elemental countries allying with each other. The village was designed on the principle that their enemies could and would eventually launch an attack to settle old feuds. The Hokage's office and the vital administrative buildings that would eventually become the Shinobi Academy were tucked away underneath a mountain range. Konoha's hospital was built a little further out from the mountain but still maintained a close distance with the other two areas. Together, these 3 blocks of land were deemed important strategic assets and in the event of an invasion were to be protected at all costs. The residential and small industrial areas of Konoha branched out in a circular arc from them, mazes and rows of street designed to form a rather misshapen heap. It wasn't uncommon for alleys to be suddenly blocked in or walls to disappear and form new paths every other week as Konoha's intelligence division launched counter-intelligence efforts against attempts at espionage. Surrounding the village were enormous walls which spanned even higher than the tallest building in Konoha. These walls were part of a collaborative project between the Leaf Village and Whirlpool Village. Powerful and now lost sealing techniques stopped the application of chakra as an adhesive surface on the outer edge of the wall. Shinobi were unable to climb over them like everybody else. They would have to use the single and easily defensible gate. The walls had only ever been breached twice, once during the devastating First War which saw enemy siege equipment use pure force to break them down, and once only 12 years ago when the corrosive and devastating potent chakra of the 9-tailed demon fox proved to be too strong for the walls to repel right before the third Hokage and repelled the enormous fox right through it and out of the village. With stockpiles of food to last months, the ability to produce new weapons and enormous walls and gates that would resist some of the most powerful techniques known to man, any army attempting to take the village would walk into a bloodbath. The other hidden villages had also been constructed to suit the advantage of those inside, and Iwa, Suna, Kiri and Kumo had just equally formidable defenses. Unfortunately, neither the Senju nor the Uchiha had ever once considered the possibility of a large aerial attack, and with good reason. Flight was extremely rare. There were some techniques that could emulate it and a few summoning contracts amongst the clans of birds, but these were limited and not applicable for a battalion of shinobi, let alone a division. Sky Country was the first true and only master of airborne warfare. Sarutobi watched from his vantage point atop the roof of the Hokage's tower, his dark eyes peeled at the sky. The traditional robes of the Hokage were gone and he wore an somewhat antiquated but still highly effective set of plated and mesh armor. His two teammates, Homura and Koharu, stood on his left and right, each contemplating the implications of the battle which was to come. An Anbu squad surrounded them all, each member crouched down and ready to defend the Hokage with their lives. Below them, the village of Konoha was almost deserted. Jonin leaders organized platoons of Chunin around designated defense zones while 3 Anbu combat platoons patrolled around Konoha's critical assets, white porcelain masks gleaming in the sun. "It's a beautiful day to go to war," Koharu murmured almost wistfully. Her voice sounded melancholic. "I'm reminded of the very first battle during the first Shinobi War. It started looking a lot like this." Homura scoffed. "It's never a good day to go to war in your own home," he disagreed quietly. "For decades we've kept the enemy away from the village. Now they're simply going to fly over everything we constructed to keep them out." "They were always dangerous," Koharu admitted. "It's why we destroyed them. We killed them and destroyed their home and they hated us," Sarutobi said quietly. The wind on the horizon was cool. "Now, they come to kill us and destroy our home and we will hate them. Perhaps, in another few decades, we shall go and kill them again, a cycle that goes on and on." Koharu and Homura shared a look behind the third Hokage's back. "You sound like your student," Homura said after a few moments. It hadn't sounded like a compliment. "He can be wise when he chooses to be," Sarutobi replied with a ghost of a smile. "Wise isn't quite the word I would have used," Koharu murmured under her breath. Sarutobi chuckled and the tension amongst the group of veterans was broken. Suddenly a bell began to toll on the other side of the village. Sarutobi's head shot up and he squinted against the glare of the sun. Another bell rang and then another and soon the village filled of noise. The third Hokage could just see them in the sky, a series of black specks high above in the clear sky. "They come with the sun behind them," Homura observed grimly. "How clever. They will have tactics that we cannot predict," Koharu added. "Put our faith in Shikaku. He has guided our forces well in the past," Sarutobi reminded them. "Look sharp, they come." With the sun behind their backs and the visibility of the defenders limited, the first wave of Skynin soared towards the village, numbering in the hundreds at least. They stayed out of range as best they could, weaving around ninjutsu as the first of the Leaf Nin began attack. As they began to glide over the massive imposing walls, small black dots fell from the back of the golden contraptions strapped to their backs. They dropped to the ground and struck at the walls and outer residences. With a sudden tremble, massive gouts of fire detonated from where they lay and explosions rocked through the village. Their bombs dropped, the Skynin abruptly dove, swooping past the shattered defenses and into the village. More bombs dropped and flashes of fire and lightning began to fill the sky. Metal crashed against metal as kunai blitzed through the air as the vengeful enemies began their invasion. Sarutobi saw a tower explode in a shower of wood, the shinobi inside instantly killed, and drew himself up. The chakra inside of him stirred. It was not as plentiful as it had once been, but that did not reflect much. Long before Hoshigaki Kisame was even born, there were many who had once compared the god of shinobi to the tailed beasts, a man with enormously large and potent chakra able to lay waste to entire fields of armies. Even in his old age, he far outstripped most of the current generation of shinobi. "Another wave," Homura called out. "I see them," Sarutobi murmured. His chakra flared and the Anbu around him involuntarily stiffened as a heavy and suffocating presence began to crush down all around them. His teammates remained unaffected as they raised their hands in preparation. "We shall repel the enemy's explosives." His hands came together and the 3 old warriors, each in their late 60s, worked in unison. Hands flicked through seals with disgusting ease and chakra melded together seamlessly as they each brought their hands up. Wind release, vacuum shockwave sphere. Koharu and Homura supplied much of the elemental chakra as Sarutobi focused on the shape of the technique. He brought his hands up, gathering enormous quantities of air from all over the village, and the wind howled all around them. The dark cloaks of the Anbu flapped madly as Sarutobi concentrated and slowly dragged his hands down. They moved sluggishly, as if encounter a lot of resistance, and at the center of the village the air rippled and the winds howled with the power of a restrained tornado. With a deep breath, Sarutobi brought his hands down and pulled apart the air in front of him with a loud grunt. From the middle of the village came a resounding boom as a massive quantity of air was instantly displaced. From the rippling air came a shockwave of high-speed winds that spread around the village in all directions. The second wave of Skynin, again numbering over 100, buckled and wobbled furiously in the air as they were hit by the outer edge of the shockwave. The explosive spheres they had dropped were lifted up and propelled away from the ground, many exploding in the air and taking a few of the flying attackers with them. For the most part, however, Sarutobi was irritated as he saw most of the enemy shinobis adjust to the new winds with an ease brought on by complete control of their flying machines. How annoying, Koharu remarked as she lowered her hands, not even looking winded from her part in the collaborative technique. They seem to be able to adjust to wind techniques quite easily, Homura agreed. Hokage-sama, one of the Anbu called out. I have observed the enemy with my Byakugan. Chakra is flowing over the wings. It's making the air flow over the top faster, allowing them to fly. That is why they can withstand the wind techniques. Understood. Sarutobi turned his head. Rat 6. Transmit that data to command. Wind techniques are ineffective. Resort to other measures. The rat-masked Anbu nodded and placed a finger against his mask. He placed his other palm on the roof, telepathically communicating the information using Yamanaka mind techniques. At the same time, the same cool female's voice that had given out the evacuation instructions blared out from all sides of the village. You have come here only to die, Skynin, the woman said solemnly. Your comrades will fall be taken away from you. Your blood will be spilled here and your country will gain nothing. Why do you fight? What are you fighting for? Why do you attack? Your ancestors sacrificed their lives so that the descendants may live and you waste it all on this. Hiruzen. Over the monument. Homura called, whirling around. Incoming. Koharu declared. Her face tightened. I count a dozen. Anbu. Kappa's squad captain called out. Protect the Hokage and the council. Sarutobi spun around and watched as the two squadrons of Skynin descended upon them. The Anbu blurred as they rose up. Metal glinted as kunai and shuriken shot through the sky. Some of them exploded in puffs of black and gray, needle-sized splinters shooting through the air in an explosion of flak. Sarutobi crossed his arms over his face and felt several impacts over his arm guards, blocking a volley of kunai aimed at his vital points. Koharu stood forward, her hands blurring in a familiar signs, while Homura formed a tiger seal and waited. Unspoken understanding passed between them and Sarutobi formed his own seals. Koharu finished first. Illusionary technique, bringer of darkness. She spread out her hands and her chakra settled down on the enemy shinobi like a restrictive net. For the Skynin, it must have been terrifying as they were suddenly surrounded by swirling darkness, their visions completely suppressed. Some of them instinctively used the release technique, but Koharu was far too adept for her illusions to be shrugged off that easily. The Skynin scattered and slowed. Sarutobi finished next. Wind release, breath of the sage. He flung his hands up and brought them down. With them came a shrieking column of wind that slammed into them from underneath. Some of them cried out in dismay as the wind beneath their wings suddenly moved faster than the wind on top. Effectively, Sarutobi nullified their ability to fly and they began to drop to the ground like bricks. Homura finished up. Fire release, great fireball technique. He held his hand up to his mouth and a flash of heat and fire exploded from his lips. It expanded and enveloped into a decently sized sphere of burning flame. Homura followed by raising his hands. Shinobi technique, web of the red spider. Using complex shape manipulation, a series of chakra strings shot from the tips of his fingers and into the fireball. It broke apart as Homura sent multiple streaks of fire surging through the air and into the now defenseless enemy. A moment later, the scorched and burning enemies hit the ground with a thud. Sarutobi heaved a sigh and turned to the Anbu. Two of you go and make sure they're dead, he ordered. Two of the Anbu nodded and disappeared in a blur of movement. Sarutobi took the moment's respite to observe the battle. Explosions continued to rock the air as waves upon waves of Skynin soared between buildings and dropped their bombs. Kunai flashed through the air as they leveled their launchers and pounded through the windows and walls, aiming at the squads of shinobis hiding inside. Smoke was beginning to rise as the village burned. There were several dozen squadrons of Skynin attacking the academy and the hospital, keeping the Anbu platoons busy. Flashes of lightning and fire sparked all over the village as Konoha shinobi resorted to ninjutsu. Overall though, the attackers seemed happy enough to lay waste to the outer buildings of Konoha and were methodically wiping out building after building. A tall, orange-tiled clock tower shuddered as an explosion took out a large chunk of its side and it careened over, falling into the rest of Konoha with a deafening roar. "This is tragic," Homura whispered. Smoke and embers rose from the burning village, blowing over the Hokage tower. "I have wished to never see our village burn again. Buildings can be replaced," Koharu consoled him, placing an arm on his shoulder. "We have entrusted the will of fire to the next generation, who we fight to protect. Konoha will live on no matter how many buildings they destroy." The woman's voice had been replaced with a man's voice now, gritty and rough, and he shouted at the enemy with reckless abandon. "You stupid fools," he thundered. "Of all the villages, Konoha is the strongest. Look at your dead comrades. They died for nothing. We will kill you all. You have started a war you cannot win. You are condemned to die a miserable death along with the rest of your loved ones. Your families will die. Your women will weep and beg and your children will hang from the trees. We will burn your homes, destroy your armies and salt your land. That shall be the price you pay for your hubris." "Hokage-sama," Rat 6 called out, a hand pressed against her head. "Command reports that the targets designated as bombers are approaching the village." Sarutobi could see them, the strange machines flying over their single-man brethren. There were only 4 that he could see as they slowly hovered past the village walls. Squadrons of flies guarded them, pounding at the ground and leaping in a wave of brutal suppressing fire. The Hokage watched them with narrowed eyes as Koharu stepped forward. "If you would, Homura," she asked softly. Homura nodded and inhaled deeply. He formed a sign, titled his head back and spat out a large globe of water. It shot into the sky as a swirling mass that quickly began to lose form when gravity took hold of it. As it slowed and reached the apex of its ascent, Koharu formed a series of signs. Water release. Water dragon bullet technique. The mass of water twisted in on itself and a giant dragon of liquid roared into the heavens and sped across the village. Koharu held the ox sign as she directed her technique at the nearest enemy bomber. It arced through the air, past the defensive screen of flyers, and shot towards the 3-man contraption. There was a sudden jerk and Koharu twitched and suddenly the chakra-generated dragon veered off, spinning around wildly and dispersing in a sudden spray of water. "What happened?" Sarutobi asked his female teammate. Koharu was still standing strong but the strain of multiple high-level techniques was beginning to show. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small black soldier pill. "Sir," the Hokage Anbu called out again. "From what I observed, the enemy bomber is using the chakra of 3 to power its flight. It works on the same principle as the other machine. However, the use of the additional chakra is creating an effect somewhat similar to the Hokage technique Kaiten. There is a sphere of rotating chakra circling the bomber. Koharu-sama's technique did not having the piercing quality to penetrate it." Sarutobi didn't even need to order Rat 6 to report and he watched as the bombers began to slow down. The furthest one stopped over the river, hovering over the moderately large brick bridge. Something protruded from the end and there was a build-up of light and bolts of purple electric-like chakra. A flash of light slammed down into the bridge and it disappeared in a cone of destructive fire that instantly vaporized not only the bridge but a good portion of the buildings on either side. Purple bolts of electricity sparkled around the thick plume of black smoke as it rose into the air. "What on earth?" Homura gasped as he felt the building rumble beneath him. "What a devastating technique." "Hiruzen," Koharu called out. From behind, Sarutobi whirled around. One of the bombers had come from over the monument. For a moment, the third Hokage feared that the craft would stop and begin to attack through the mountain and into the evacuation center hidden deep inside. Instead, he glided over and began to slowly make its way towards the Hokage's tower. A wave of sky nin advanced before it, 24 or so enemy shinobi on an attack vector towards them. "If the Hokage's tower is hit by that much concentrated chakra," Homura muttered worriedly. "Suppress the advance guard," Sarutobi called out. He bit his finger and formed some signs. "I will destroy the bomber." He slammed his hand down on the ground as his 2 teammates stepped in front of him and worked with the Anbu to send a volley of fiery streaks through the air. Smoke exploded in front of him and Sarutobi straightened as Enma, the Monkey King, appeared. "So Naruto was right," Enma rumbled. His yellow eyes surveyed the village with something like anger as the well-polished leaf headband on his head glittered. "Perhaps I will not punish him for ordering me to reverse summon one of the little infants. Enma, use the transformation technique and be prepared for a replacement technique. Sarutobi barked. He gestured at the enemy bomber, which approached closer and closer as its defensive screen darted around it, combating the Anbu and council members. We will destroy that machine before it can unleash its weapon. Understood. Enma nodded. He disappeared in a puff of smoke and Sarutobi reached out and grabbed the adamantine staff. Sarutobi held it under his arm and leveled the tip of it so it was pointing at the bomber. Go, he thundered. With a streak of black, Enma elongated and shot forward with incredible force. The same drawn-out staff that pushed the nine-tailed demon fox out of the village clipped one of the flyers and turned the shinobi, flying it into mush as it rocketed past the defensive screen of flyers and approached the bomber. For a moment it looked as if it would overshoot, but suddenly a large hairy arm lashed out from the side of the staff and a strong meaty hand grabbed at the nearest metal pod. Behind it, the Sky Nin jerked in surprise. He fumbled behind him, reaching for a blade, as the head and torso of Enma the Monkey King appeared from the end of the staff. Enma ducked the first swipe and caught the second in his powerful grip. He ripped the sword out of the shinobi's hands and tossed it away. The shinobi leaned back as Enma flashed through a series of hand seals and suddenly he glowed. On the roof of the Hokage's tower, Sarutobi also glowed and the two of them transformed into glowing orbs of shining light with a long black bar in between them. In a flash, Enma's orb of light rocketed downwards towards the ground and Sarutobi went up towards the sky. The orbs approached each other, passed through and exchanged spots. Enma reappeared on the roof, his feet digging into the tiles, his left arm gripping his right which was still transformed and wobbling in the air. On the other end, Sarutobi reappeared on the tip of Enma's staff, staring down at the Sky Nin in front of him with death in his eyes. No, the man screamed as Sarutobi leapt at his pod, half a dozen shuriken in his fist. He threw them at the Sky Nin as he landed on all fours in front of him. His right hand darted forward, slamming the man's face up and exposing his neck. His left gripped a kunai and shoved in the side of the shinobi's neck. The third Hokage jerked it across and stood, his enemy already forgotten. His kunai fell from his grip and it bobbed around him, dangling from a piece of wire that was coiled around Sarutobi's finger. Fire release. Flame Dragon Bullet Technique. Sarutobi breathed out a stream of fire and held his hands apart. The fire roared as it broke into two different currents, one following his left hand and slamming into the second occupied pod and another curving around as his right hand did and exploded on the third. The two pods exploded in a shower of splintered metal and wood and the humming of the machine instantly stopped. Sarutobi's eyes narrowed and pressed against the pod he was standing on. Chakra fed into his feet and he propelled himself off the pod and onto the center of the machine as it began to slowly descend. With a show of chakra-enhanced strength similar to his former student, Sarutobi ripped open a metal panel and flicked his right hand. Behind the panel, a large, bare-chested and muscular shinobi jerked in surprise. Sarutobi's left hand slammed forward and gripped him mercilessly by the neck as the wire in his right hand pulled the kunai into his palm. The third Hokage's eyes darted around the small compartment, memorizing everything he saw in an instant, as he reversed his grip and brought the kunai directly across into the veiled man's temple. Sarutobi hurled the kunai back at the first pod and flicked the air with his other hand. Explosive notes slapped onto the metal compartment and sizzled. Sarutobi pulled himself back to the first pod, jumped on the black staff still protruding out in the air and tapped it sharply. On the ground, Enma pulled back on his arm and the staff shortened, taking Sarutobi down from the bomber. On the way down the third Hokage absently cut the wire on his finger and flicked it through the air, where it coiled around a flyer's contraption and sent the kunai attached to the end neatly through the Sky Nin's eye socket. An instant later, Sarutobi touched back down on the roof in a graceful crouch, two fingers held straight in one hand. Detonate. As the veering bomber exploded in a tremendous ball of fire, the god of shinobi rose from the ground. There was none of the kindness, cheerfulness or grumpiness that many of the newer generation only knew him for. This was the face of the man that had led his village through 3 separate world wars and was prepared to lead it again in a 4th. The flyers abruptly withdrew and his teammates walked back to where he was standing. "You're still as reckless as ever," Homura chided. His armor was singed and the tip of a kunai lay embedded in one of his arm guards. "It's to be expected," Koharu sighed. Sarutobi grunted in response and watched the battle occurring over the village. The female voice was talking again in soothing tones, her voice echoing loudly over the village. There is no hope left for you, she said, and she sounded truly sympathetic. Our village will crush you and grind you to dust. This is not a threat, this is a fact. This is the inevitable conclusion of this attack. Surrender. Lower your weapons and offer yourself up to the nearest Leaf Nin. Mercy will be shown. Names will be taken. Your families and loved ones will be spared. You can still come out of this alive and happy. Surrender. Please. Let us show you mercy. One of the bombers near the hospital was in flames as the Anbu platoons coordinated an effective defense. As he watched, another bomber disappeared underneath as a guy's daytime tiger technique tore it to pieces underneath its massive concussive power. He steadied his breathing and attempted to hide his weariness from his subordinates. There was a tight pain in his chest and he carefully settled his raging chakra. His body was simply not able to contain it as well as he used to. Luckily, the invasion seemed to be faltering as Sky Nin peeled away from the attack and soared back into the sky. Hokage-sama, the Hyuga Anbu called out. The enemy shinobi have depleted the majority of their chakra. They are withdrawing. Excellent, Sarutobi rumbled. He watched his village burn and turned around. Homura and Koharu followed him as he walked past the dead or dying Sky Nin littered around him. Summon the council immediately. We have much to discuss. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.